thanks for coming tonight. Assuming that folks got to see the film. I just watched it for the second time before coming on to this conversation. And I got a lot more out of it even the second time, which was really wonderful. So with us tonight are Jim and Camilla, who run Beckett Films. They're based in California and Australia. And previous to the Seeds of Vandana Shiva film, they made Sons of Africa, a documentary about the sons of Idi Amin and Julius Nyerere, who climbed Kilimanjaro on a historic peace climb between their two nations. And before that, they produced 9 films for the ecumenical patriarch of the Orthodox Church, who brought together religious leaders, environmentalists, and scientists to focus on ecologically threatened water bodies around the world. Their projects have won many awards, including 2 Humanitas Awards and a George Foster Peabody Award. And so I'm really excited that we get to have a conversation with both of you tonight. We are, just for a little bit of housekeeping, everyone's going to have the opportunity to ask questions. We're going to be using the chat function for that. So I'm going to get things started with the conversation a little bit, but we will have a Q&A area. So I just want everyone to test out the chat. So a few of you have already been using it, but if you aren't familiar with Zoom, which I know so many people by now are sick of Zoom and more than familiar with it, but it's a wonderful feature to, in the chat, if you haven't already, just let us know where you're zooming in from, if you're part of a seed library or what your intersection with seeds are. And then Lexi, hi Lexi, can you wave to everyone? Lexi's gonna be keeping an eye on the questions in chat. And then I'll be asking the questions for you so that we don't have a lot of interrupting each other when we're having this conversation. So Jim and Camilla, I wanted to just set the stage a little bit together because I can't even remember how long ago it was that you initially sent me an email saying, hey, we're going to be working on this film about Vandana Shiva, and like, you know, letting me know about it. Why did this idea come about? When did that come about? And how long have you been working on this to get to this point where we now finally get to see the beautiful—
Now we're going to face who is going to answer between.
Right.
I can assure you that it was all happened in this century, but it was close actually. I mean, what happened was that I knew you mentioned these films under the auspices of the Green Patriarch that were environmental films, and Vandana Shiva took part in those, which took part on a ship where scientists and environmentalists went around a body of water, and religion and science had never been too friendly. And the idea was that the environment was a common interest. So it went through on 8 different bodies of water, from the Amazon to the Arctic. It was a fantastic idea. And one of the ones that we hoped to do was on the Ganges. And so we met with Vandana Shiva there, and that's where, hey, wait a minute, why don't we do a film about you, Vandana? And she said, sure. So that was a bit of a surprise. But anyway, so then we started, and we first went to India. Take it away, Camilla.
Okay. We first went to India in 2013 to Navdanya, and we've been there maybe 4 times since to film her there. So it really sort of started in fits and starts then. I mean, part of the barrier and why it took so long was because we had to chase her around the world to interview her, and we're sort of a little bit of a mom and pop, organization. So it wasn't as if we had a big studio who could finance us running around after her. So we sort of did it a little bit in bits and drips and drabs, but we first interviewed her. Our first interviews are from right at the end of 2013, I would say. And that's, we went to one of the courses that she was holding around Gandhian activism with a guy called Sutish Kumar. I don't know if you know him. And we interviewed a few people there who are still in the film and still friends and have stayed with us along the way. So yeah, that was the first idea. And I mean, that really, meeting her through these environmental films, we realized what a rock star she was in terms of her just ability to mobilize interest and to sort of get interest in the issues. And we came to care very much. I mean, we've been interested in environmental issues for a long time, and we increasingly cared about the issue of food and seed. And we just thought that she was a great vector to spread the good news. Yeah. Along with the bad news, so yeah. And we also thought a biography is interesting to other people rather than the sort of more traditional documentary style, which is talking heads and issues. We thought her life story was fascinating and empowering and great for women and great for activists and just great on a lot of levels. And so we thought, let's tell the story of food and food systems through how she's approached it.
Yeah, and she's all over the internet with 5-minute clips. She's in a lot of documentaries, but no one has told her life story. And I think a lot of people who know her are interested in that. Where did this woman out of the Himalayas come from? How did she become a world figure, this little old lady, as she calls herself? Yeah.
And so you must have wound up over that. That's a pretty long period of time to be in relationship with her. And like you said, chasing her around the world. And so a lot, things were changing as you were making the film and there were new developments happening. And I'm just curious if there were things that you wish you could, like that happened that you filmed that you wish you could have included, but sort of wound up on the editing floor, or how, and that process of making those decisions, because it felt like you were trying to tell her life story, but you're also trying to focus on the issues that she's addressing at the same time. So I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about those.
That's very well put. You actually sum up our dilemma. And I will give one quick one, and then I'm sure Camilla has a number of the ones I wish I were in, and we would argue over it. But that was the birth of her child, Carnegie. And she went into labor and she was rushed off to the hospital. And the woman doctor said, get up there, we're going to do a cesarean, and cesarean, no way. So she got up, left, and then they drove around looking for a hospital. And finally, at the military hospital, found a doctor who would do it. And why that interested me in particular, you're always trying to find incidents that will show a person's character, right? And that was very much her character. Because, I mean, so many people would just, okay, doctor, you know what you're doing, go ahead, cut me. And it was utterly unnecessary, and she had a very good childbirth. So I'm sorry that we that we cut that. But what is also interesting is you leave something behind, and you're all sad about it, et cetera, darn it, especially if you lost an argument. And then you totally forget about it. I mean, you don't remember, it's gone. So Camilla, you have scenes you wish that were in it?
Well, yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of time with her, and we couldn't always have a camera in her face. So there were a lot of moments, that are good anecdotes at a dinner party or something like that, that I wish that we could have captured, where we really had a really good laugh, or just, very quirky things. I was reminding Jim this morning, about the first time we actually went to the Heirloom Seed Expo, which was, I think it was in 2015. And previous to that was this, and I think maybe that's where I met you, Ken. We went to the Soil Not Oil conference, and Vandana was a keynote speaker there in Richmond. So she did Soil Not Oil. It was a big event, and then to the Seed Expo. Anyway, in the midst of all of that, there was a party we had to go to, and the one way we always tried to get close to her was to like put our hands up to drive her anywhere, and then we could get some understanding of what was going on in her mind, and then we would know, what are we going to talk about with her when we're on camera or something like that. So we were always running around in our beaten up old Honda with Vandana in the back seat. It was just, and she was always so game to drive across California with us. It was, she was a lot of fun actually to be with. When we were driving around and when we weren't on camera and she wasn't like being Vandana, the sort of oracle about all of that. So, there was one time in Richmond, during this time, we went to a party at John Relax, Nutiva, and it was up in the hills, and we got completely lost. We were full, we had a car busting with Californians, and Vandana was the one who like, wait, no, go there, go there, go there, go there. We were like driving around in circles in our hometown, and and Vandana is so brilliant. She even knew how to find a way back to the hotel. And anyway, so those are the kind of things which would be fun, but you can never think. But the other thing is also there were some actions that we just couldn't follow. The golden rice thing, the bananas things, we weren't around for the neem thing, which the neem patent. Sorry to anybody who might not know about these issues, we can maybe put some links in the chat afterwards. But about very important issues that she fought that we weren't around we weren't able to follow. But she was involved with a lot of actions it was successful actions that we weren't able to include in the film because it was just be too much. Yeah, also. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sort of related to that, and just a reminder to everyone in the room, as questions pop up, just put them in the chat, and Lexi will be reading those and passing them on to me so that we can add them to the questions. You don't have to wait for some special moment. Whatever's popping up into your head, whenever it's coming up, please just drop it in the chat and we'll take care of it. But related to what you were just talking about, I was just curious, was Vandana giving you input about what she thought was important to be in the film? Or, did she have any sort of agency within this, or did you just collect the footage and then kind of look at everything you have and try and figure out the narrative, like from what you were able to capture?
We can share, but yes, no, she signed a release immediately, and no, she didn't have input. However, when she saw the film, and that's another question, what her first reaction was, but we showed the film at a draft of it at an event called Echo Farm. And she was there, and there was an audience there that received it well. And after it was over, and in that draft, there were pictures of her former husband. And that was the one comment she ever had about what, Camilla? Take it, take it out. I don't want to see.
Yes, we had to work very hard to keep the custody case in the film with her. That was the one area where she just didn't. She liked the idea that, she played an enormous part in changing the custody law in India, that no longer prejudiced mothers, right? If you've watched the film, naturally custody went to fathers. That was the law, no questions asked. She and another woman actually took a case. It took 10 years. It ended up in the Supreme Court, and women had rights to custody of their children after it went to the Supreme Court. So she actually was very much key in changing the custody laws. it was a little bit of a hard one because it's not an environmental issue, it's not a food issue, so it's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but it's a feminist issue, and it's basically a film about women. So a woman and ecofeminism to a certain extent. So, but it took us years for her to tell us the story. And then when she did tell the story finally, we don't know the full story. And I think some people have said, tell me more about the divorce. Well, we don't know that much more about the divorce. We did get some photographs from his son Carnegie of his dad. We put them in, and Vandana asked us to take them out. And that is the only part where she got uncomfortable. Otherwise, I have to say she's quite happy. And is she having editorial input now? No, but I keep on getting emails from her. Could you put this on the website? And so she's sort of dragging us into her, into a lot of her actions. Not dragging, but yeah. So
yeah, that was
she's getting very involved in what we're doing now. Yeah,
that was sort of the third rail of the family story. And it was something she didn't want to talk about. And also I have the sister saying, that's something that all made us unhappy, but it did produce a son. So, yeah, so I think she did not interfere at all in the making of the film. And when she first saw it, a good version of it, she was really happy with it because she thought, we were just going to string together these sit-down interviews with her, which is sort of what she was used to. And then to suddenly relive the battle in the Punjab, to have all these things that were illustrated, and the whole thing in 1999 in Seattle, the Battle of Seattle, all of that to suddenly, which is what film can do, is show you what happened, et cetera. So yeah, so she was really happy when she first saw it.
Well, you bring up another sort of point that people might be curious about, which is, I think we've all seen things that are strung together interviews. There's a lot of footage that helps tell this story in this film that isn't just her sitting down and talking to you. So, what does that kind of work entail for finding footage like that? And so I'm just curious about that process and that part of the filmmaking as different than the actual being with Vandana and talking to her.
Yeah, you asked us what were the enjoyable parts and the not so enjoyable parts, but Camilla really took the lead in the archive search. Camilla?
Yeah, the archives, I had to say I'd never done it before, and that might be the reason. When the archive research was a lot to do with why it took so long, actually. Because we had the initial interviews. Well, no, that's not entirely true, but the archives was a very, very big job because a lot of the stories are older, and news TV stations and press agencies own the footage, and there's a whole thing about rights, and they're charge an arm and a leg. And so it was a sort of a real, it was like forensic accounting, actually, a lot of the time. Try and find something that illustrates the story so it's not all talking heads. Try and find a bunch of those things. See if we can fair use them. I don't know if anybody knows about fair use, but there's a way when you can use footage that you don't actually have to license it. And then dealing with all the licensing and stuff like that. So it was a laborious process, but actually in the end, a very rewarding process. And if I had to do it again, I now know what to do. Yeah. So, because our other films really did not rely on archival footage, and yeah. But it was
an important dimension of the film to me. And I think it gave the film, some depth and some rhythm as well to break up the interviews. So thank you for putting in that extra, extra work and the frustration that went into making that piece happen.
Well, I mean, this history is interesting, right? So, and it teaches us about the present and the future. So we did feel it was important. And of course, now that it's over, I'm not suffering as much.
When we talk about regrets of what wasn't in there, the whole issue of what can go in, it becomes legal, and we have to hire a lawyer who will decide whether you can use something or not. And this concept of fair use basically says that if you have a very short clip of something, okay, you can use it. But what this meant was that the critics of Vandana, we just have little short clips of them, and I would have liked to have used more. For example, the New Yorker article was a real blow to her because that was basically her constituency. And that journalist who, was very pro Monsanto, he was against labeling GMOs and food, and so he had his own position. And there was more footage of him giving a TED talk, which I wish we could have used, but I'm sure he would not have given permission for it. And we just did not want to get into that where we'd end up in a legal battle. So in a way, maybe that opened us to the criticism that, I mean, what is this? Is this a vanity project for this woman? I mean, what is this? She comes off so well. But my feeling, again, is this is a kind of David and Goliath story. And the whole Monsanto bear, that they're just spreading so many false rumors about her. So this is basically giving her day in court. And what is in the film is factual. And if she appeals to you and what she's doing, then, keep an open mind.
Mm-hmm. The New Yorker piece is interesting because in one of my older lectures, I actually have an image. There was an issue that came out where the entire back page, the back page up on the other side of the cover, basically the back of the magazine, was an ad from Monsanto. Mm-hmm. Like a promo. And so I was like, wow, like why is Monsanto advertising and the most expensive page of the whole magazine when the main readers of this magazine aren't farmers who are going to be buying Monsanto products? Like, who are they trying to influence through this? And I actually looked it up, and I think it's like a $200,000 ad spot or something, like completely insane. And so I had, while I was watching, I was sort of putting this together that, Monsanto and others have their own media people.
Oh, yeah.
Their own spin people. And so they're very careful and very, very aware of how they're trying to influence public opinion about who they are and what they're doing and what the purpose of genetic engineering is. That ad happened to be that, I'm not sure if other folks saw it, that ad that said like, everyone's starving, like billions of people, we can't feed them, but we can do it through genetic engineering, which really did change my interactions with people. People started asking me that question. Mm-hmm. Oh, like it sounds like you're against genetic engineering, but that's the only way we can feed the planet. I've heard that's the only way we can feed the planet. Yeah. And it suddenly became a question that I had to answer that I hadn't had to answer before. And that was really the marketing money and smarts of the biotech multinationals.
Was that in the same issue, Ken?
It wasn't in the same issue.
Same issue, no. Gosh, I wish I'd known about that before, because just as a still shot, that would have been, yeah.
I think I do think I remember. And interestingly enough, when that article came out, we were in the middle of filming too, and we had fundraised for our filming trips through our own little mailing list. It was like friends and family, you know what I mean? We're putting in for us to fly to India. And then suddenly we got a lot from our own friends who had previously been very supportive of the project were suddenly questioning, well, wait a second, who is this? You know, we read this New Yorker piece. Who is this person? Are you sure you're backing the right horse? We're not sure. We're as supportive as we were before. From all sorts of quarters, we were. So you can imagine, just from our little end, then, you know, the trickle down through. So it was really quite impactful. It impacted her funding. It impacted her credibility. It impacted a lot of things. And yet, and I don't remember, I did a little bit of research at the time, but there was, you know, like everything else, you know, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but you know, you have to follow the money a little bit. And a lot of the money to the New Yorker has, you know, has got some roots in those big corporations. So,
yeah, Condé Nast.
Yeah. So anyway, so it was interesting that they just decided to do a sort of a hit piece on this little old lady from India. Anyway,
she did not agree to be interviewed, incidentally. He never interviewed her.
Yeah.
She got wind of, oh, this is not going to work out well. And you did see him there in Italy when she's giving a talk in Italy, and he's there. But he did not interview her. I mean, she said she put him off, and that was right. This was going to be, we can call it a hit job. And
well,
because he interviews the head of Monsanto in that piece, you know, and sort of is advising him, you know, what can you do to make the public understand that this is, you know, this is going to save Africa, this is going to save the world. So
right. So I'm gonna there's a couple questions coming in, so I'm gonna share some of them with you now. This is from Sherry Breen, and she said, one aspect of Vandana's work that always has struck me is the non-international home-based work of the Navdanya experimental, oh, I lost my experimental farm in, how do you say, Darudan?
Dehradun.
She has been instrumental in mentoring young and old Indian farmers. Can you expand a bit and tell stories about your observations of her role there?
You want to go, sweetie?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, she has a university there and gets a lot of foreigners basically to come, and they go through a training for organic agriculture, et cetera. But more importantly, she brings Indian farmers to the farm, and we were there once when they have sort of a building that is covered but is open, and it was absolutely packed with Indian farmers. And she has set up seed banks, which you're all familiar with, more than 500 seed banks around India, and has taught organic agriculture. And I think the numbers are, you know, in the hundreds of thousands who have now done it. So I remember these people all coming to the farm with their families, all nicely dressed for the occasion. And she is a wonderful teacher. And she, as also showed in the film, you know, she goes off to villages and she talks to the villagers and gets seeds from them. And so she's created this, this whole network. And as we heard so much today about sharing seeds and setting up a library and all of that, she has really had an impact in India for that. I don't have any hotshot anecdote about you know, someone came and said, what are you doing? You know, we need GMOs. And so with a brilliant rhetorical flourish, she changed that person's view and that person's life. But I don't have that kind of anecdote. But I certainly did observe her, you know, speaking to hundreds and hundreds of Indian farmers who came there.
And also going around, we traveled with her to Maharashtra and to some other places around where the suicide belt, what they call the suicide belt, where all the farmers are, most of the farmers' suicides have happened. So we traveled with her on a little bit of what you called a pilgrimage with some people from India and some other people internationally. And we went on this filming trip with her, and it was sort of a bit of a teach-in. She was taking people they went to Sir Albert Howard's place in Indore, who, the Agricultural Testament. I don't know if you know him. He sort of was the one who brought compost back to the West, which of course Indians have been doing forever. So she would go, she in this particular case, we followed her going to cotton farmers in Maharashtra and talking to them about organic and promoting. She has a guy that she works with who also goes around India to help people transition from GMO cotton to organic cotton and all of that kind of stuff. But the one thing that, you might be curious about the farm is that it's actually it's quite small. How many acres would you say it is, Jim? It's not that big. It's probably like 5 acres, right?
A little bigger than that.
Maybe that.
But it isn't that big, but it's
not big.
Very productive.
It's extremely productive, and it started out as a eucalypt plantation. It's also in Dehradun, which is where she grew up. So it's not far from, their ancestral home is 5 miles from the farm. Her brother still lives there. And she has a core group of people who have been doing the seed saving, who grow vegetables for people who visit the farm. Everybody please go, the food is divine. And then she has a turnover of interns that come, throughout the year. I don't know what's happening now in COVID, probably not much. But so she has a core group of maybe 15 people who live and work there, do the seed saving, do the organic growing, do some of the teaching, do some of the outreach to farmers, do some of the teaching to farmers in India. And then a sort of an international group of people who sort of come and go and stay on the property. She has a little sort of bunker. You can see some of those in the shots. And she stays there often, and it's sort of almost like a dorm-like setting. It's very simple, the living quarters there. And she stays there.
One of the things there are about 5 or 6 things that the opposition from all talks about her. And one of them is that every time she opens her mouth speaking, she gets $40,000. And the only thing that interests this woman really is money. And she's got, she leads the high life in India, and she gets on a plane first class. Actually, she does. The doctor said, you better go business class now because you're just too old to keep going in economy class. She leads a very modest Gandhian lifestyle. And I said to her, come on, Vandana, you're like a saint. You've got to give us something to criticize, some aspect of humanity. And then Camilla, you maybe could tell about the famous seed pilgrimage where.
Well, we're going off on a bit of a tangent. Do you want to?
But I don't know how we got started on that. Okay.
Ken, rein us in.
No, I'm not reining you in. I want to hear this tangent, and then I have another question, a follow-up question from some.
Well, I know. I certainly after Jim had said, we got to get a little bit of dirt on Farmer Vandana here, and she said, "Oh no, I can be mean." And next thing, right, they were building a sort of another building on the farm, and then we saw her laying into the workers there. Everybody was running scared. So she can be very tough. Yeah. And there are some scenes in the film where she's tough on other people. But the one time I remember when we thought actually we were going to get the kibosh and she was going to pull the rug on filming was when we went, in fact, on this soil pilgrimage. It was a soil pilgrimage. It was very intense. We were up at 2 a.m. and bed at 11, and our poor camera guy had to download all the footage. We literally did not sleep for a week. It was, and all the people who were with us did not, it was very intense, just sort of driving, meetings, flying, make it to the airport, get in the car, go here, go there, speak to this people. And we're running around with all this camera equipment. And I've got a photograph of Jim and our camera guy, Jim Whitney, at a village we went to, and they were lovely and fed us and put wreaths around us. And poor Jim and the two Jims couldn't stand up. They were just, literally could not stand up afterwards. But Vandana was running it all. It was a lot of hard work, and she was exhausted, and she got really, I think she got really, really tired, and she got really, really grumpy. So she suddenly said to us, me in the food line, we were lining up for food. She said, I don't know if I trust you. I don't know if I trust you. I think you're getting too close. There's, you need to put the cameras away. Blah. And she was just sort of snapping at everybody, and she included snapping at us. So that was a bit hairy for a moment. And fortunately, Carnegie, her son, who was also traveling on the trip, I sort of beetled off to him and said, Carnegie, help. Can you calm her down? But suddenly she's not trusting anybody. And he intervened, and we were back in good relations afterwards. But yeah.
So she's a real human being.
She's a
There
real
you
human
go.
being,
There you go.
tired
Yeah,
and stressed. Yes. Yep.
That's great.
Yeah.
And he's really lovely.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Mhm.
he really is. So this is a question from Elizabeth Johnson. The Tree Huggers segment went straight to my heart, she said. When did you get to that piece?
In the sense of, I mean, that was a formative period in her life. So following her life story, that certainly had to be in. And she was very young then, and when all of this started. And she went off to university in Western Ontario, and she would come back and help the tree huggers, as it were, the Chipko movement. And she had, as she says in the film, she could write English, she could make graphs and all of that. So the Chipko, who were illiterate women, they had a spokesperson that gave that visibility and gave the Chipko movement, we would say today, I guess, a brand, which also had a theme song. As we saw in the film, that there were tree hugging became a movement.
Elizabeth, are you asking about the footage, or when did we? I mean, I will speak to the footage in that piece because it's really quite that section. Yes. Okay. The photographs. Okay, this is filmmaking, right? It's Hollywood, a little bit of smoke and mirrors. But some of the photographs are, there's an original, the most beautiful photograph in that piece is an original photograph that was taken by a German woman who actually took of the real tree huggers. Some of the black and whites are original photographs by this woman who took us years to track her down, actually, to ask her permission to use her photographs.
Swedish.
There are a couple of archival photographs. What?
Wasn't she Swedish?
Oh, excuse me. No. Swedish.
Northern European woman. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, she had been there, during that period and had taken some photographs, and they were incredibly beautiful. And she was lovely and gave us permission to use them. That's a whole nother thing. It's about how many people donated stuff to us in the end, just because they appreciate Vandana and wanted to support the project. Were they originals? Yes, they're all originals. Some of the archive photographs are by an Indian American photographer who actually set up some shots. And then the film footage is by some friends of ours who did went into these indigenous villages in the Himalayas and spent time with them and photographed the women living their lives, caring for their children as they would have been during the time. And so we licensed his archival footage to illustrate what the women's lives were like. Yeah.
Actually, now talking about archives, there was such a difference between those who donated their footage or their photographs. Yes, go ahead, this is a good cause. And then others, that same Indian filmmaker or whatever, for a bit of their footage, they wanted $35,000. And that's like, my God, why? Because they talked to their friend filmmakers and they got from the BBC, about, $100 a second or whatever. So we found someone else who had made a film and covered the same thing, which was still pretty expensive. But at a certain point, there were themes that were so important, you absolutely had to pay the toll.
And where were the originals? Actually, there was very, very, very little. As Americans, and in America, everything, we forget that there was a time when, there was a time when not everything was recorded. And even as recently as the 70s, 80s, everything was not recorded in India. So besides the very few archival photographs of that period of the original tree huggers, there's really nothing.
Indian TV did not archive their footage. They threw it out. So you don't have a history of with Indian television.
Yeah. So, we got it from Associated Press, from CNN. We did not, from NBC, we got nothing. We could not find anything in India of periods, because it was either not shot or it was not kept. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, what was kept? I mean, the British Empire, the movie tone, all those newsreels. There were some newsreels dating back to Gandhi's time and all of that. But when the British left, there wasn't that much coverage.
Right, we got from British archives quite a bit of stuff. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if you'll have an answer to this, but the question is coming from Bonnie Baruki. Can you speak on her role empowering village women in India? Are there more women in India running farms now?
Test us, Ken, test us.
Well, I will say,
you don't have to know the answer. You could say you don't know.
Well, I don't know if there are more women. I don't know if there are more women running farms now, to tell you the truth. I mean, maybe, but I don't know. I don't have data on that. But I do know that that women are farming all the time in India. They are the farmers. So especially the food farmers, for their families, for their communities. So definitely what I saw mostly is the women in the fields, even at Navdanya, basically, actually. The managers of it and the women are farming. But it's actually, which speaks to your point, Bonnie. But when we witnessed these crowds, upwards of 100 plus people coming to these sort of teach-ins at the farm, I would say 99.9% of those people were women. So women are very much involved with this food system there. I mean, I think the problem in the world is that women are not recognized as being so integral to the food systems, especially in developing countries. And that's what we're really trying to push back against, is the sort of patriarchal top-down management of food systems that is disempowering women and small communities across the world, #Gates. Mm-hmm.
Greece is a country that I know well, and my image is the men in the cafe and the women in the fields.
So do they have more power? Are there more deciders? I would imagine definitely Vandana has had an influence on that. And I would say, yes, it's trending, but I don't know what the numbers are.
I'm curious, one of the things that really changed fairly recently that happened while you were making the film, many of us felt that, our primary target of activism was Monsanto. And at a certain point, Monsanto was, the consolidation of the seed industry further consolidated with Bayer taking over Monsanto and Syngenta going to ChemChina and Dow DuPont merging. Was there any discussion of that, or was that, I didn't really see that get to be reflected so much in the film, and I'm just curious.
I think that your efforts and everybody's efforts, I think that was a serious push for Monsanto to put in their chips and have Bayer buy them out for the same amount of money that they would pay in court cases about Roundup, as it turned out. So that was a problem because Monsanto was such an identifiable known target. And our log line often was, she's Monsanto's worst nightmare. I think that still plays, but you're right that the target grew a little more hazy. And I think that all the efforts people like you made did push Monsanto to figure they better get another name.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about the ad on the back of the New Yorker, their PR people, I think that they obviously decided it's time to retire this brand because this brand is getting hammered, and there doesn't look like much recovery. They're not going to recover. But in terms of internally, did we turn ourselves into pretzels and try and figure out what we need? How do we need to address that? We decided not to address it in the film, certainly, because we'll never keep up. We had to sort of stop somewhere, stick it to her life story. If we were doing a film purely about the issues, it would be a question of dating ourselves very, there's a new crisis, a new issue around every corner. We still haven't quite figured out whether we should use Monsanto in our log lines or not, but we are sort of positioning our messaging a little bit more towards sort of industrial agriculture, because I think people maybe will understand what industrial agriculture stands for. If not, we hope to be able to sort of help that become something that is understandable versus regenerative, organic, ecological, climate mitigating, if we're going to sort of be polarized. But the Monsanto, I think, is a name that still plays, certainly amongst people who know Vandana and know organic, but it's not going to last forever. And because, they've got a much bigger PR, they're good at that. So,
and she's always a couple of years ahead of the issues. And now she's taking on Bill Gates, which, talking about saints, Bill Gates is one of our modern saints. And he is the largest agricultural landholder in the United States. And he has a whole program for GMOs and all of this. And so she's taken him on. So I'm glad that's not in the film at the moment, because then we'd be opening up a whole new can. But she's brilliant. I mean, she is so smart. She reads a book. She and her detractors say she's not a scientist. Not at all. She has a degree in philosophy, and in fact, her degree from the Western Ontario, it is a doctor of philosophy, but was in quantum theory. And, you know, she used to, when she was at university, the girls would go out partying Saturday night, and she'd do for fun, she'd solve equations. I mean, she has a mind that is utterly scientific. So to say she's not a scientist is calumny.
So we have a few more minutes, and I know, especially for East Coast people and any East Coast people who are farming, it's getting late. So there's a few things I just want to make sure that we get to before we wrap up, which I'm sure folks are curious about. You know, sort of what's next for the film, distribution, what's the film going to be used for? Are there opportunities to use it as a teaching tool, or to share it in workshops, or to show it at your seed library? Because I know a lot of seed libraries love having, you know, events where they can bring people in to learn and have these conversations. So can you talk a little bit about what's next?
We're so grateful that you invited us to be part of this, because that was really good. But yeah. Camilla, you're best placed to answer this.
Well, I mean, it's just finished, so you're actually our first sort of event. But so thank you for having us. We are busy submitting to film festivals. We just got accepted to, and I mean, we've literally started all of this in the last months because we finished it 6 weeks ago. We've been accepted in Illuminate Film Festival, and where are they? Anyway,
Sedona.
So that's in May, and then just waiting to hear. We've got probably another 15 applications out there. It's quite a long process. It's very competitive, by the way, the film festival circuit now, especially in time of COVID, because they're, you know, they'd see 2,000 films and they take 20. So, but it's film festivals. We've got some people there sniffing around for distribution, Netflix and that kind of thing. And then, but our most important model, I think, will be community screenings, which is what we always thought we would do with this film, given, you know, a whole lot of factors that we thought that would be the best way to get it out there. So, so if anybody's interested in doing a community screening, I have to, Organic Consumers and Regeneration International are just running a fundraiser for us right now. So, and we have raised some funds. So we're going to redo our website. That's also in process at the moment, where we will have a portal which will make it simplify and create processes for licensing for community screenings, either through this ticket right model or through you know, licensing, and then you get the download and all of that kind of stuff. So truthfully, I'm figuring that out. We are figuring that out, but that should be up and running within a month or so. But in the meantime, I'm sort of I have people who are doing community screenings, and we're doing it just, you know, figuring it out for each particular situation. But that's the way. I mean, one thing people should do is, if they could join our mailing list, that would be great. I could put the,
you want to put that in the chat?
Can I put that in the chat?
Yep. And could we put the website in the chat too?
Yes. And there is actually a form to request a community screening.
Oh, great.
We're also, I mean, because we're having this fundraiser, to look at the educational market, and the film is 80 minutes long, and that does not lend itself well to schools, right? So the whole idea is to make a shorter film, 30 minutes or 50 minutes for school. And television has a 50-minute, if we wanted to get on television. So, you know, there is a cost and there's also a cost in pain to know what to cut. But, you know, probably better to give to somebody else. You do what you can. But also that educational market is terribly important, and that's part of our intention.
Right, and translations too is what we've got a lot of people asking us for a Spanish version of French or Spanish translation.
Yeah, and she is a world figure, so there is an audience out there that is interested in her.
So
yes.
We're certainly trucking along. we're a little bit, yeah, that's basically the thing. Great.
Yeah.
Email me. Wait,
Great.
I'm putting my email address.
Thanks.
Uh,
I know this is going to sound incredibly old-fashioned,
Oh,
but
I love it. I love it.
a lot of libraries still have DVDs, and people do check them out. Not everyone has access to streaming, but everyone has access to their local library. So I'm just curious if you envision there being a physical DVD that libraries would be able to purchase and add to their collections so that people have access to this film.
That's a really good question, you know, because DVDs, the computer I have now, it's so thin, you can't put a DVD in, and very few people, and generally in the filmmaking community, you know, DVDs are passé. But there is sort of a collectioner's item about a DVD. It should have a wonderful cover, and you have it there. So, but what you're talking about libraries and
yeah, that's important. Yeah, I've resisted it a little bit, but actually we watch DVDs from the library here all the time. You know, we've got a little machine that we plug into so, I mean, my daughter goes and we've got a pile of DVDs, and we're discovering fabulous old stuff that you can't get on Netflix. So, yes, if you want to, I mean, we can burn one DVD. So, you know, this is so if you want one, we can make it happen.
It's incredibly retro.
Having a nice cover. Having a nice cover is good. Yeah.
But actually, I mean, that's what we should do. We should speak to somebody who knows more about libraries, anybody here, and find out, you know, what we need to figure out what the process is to get it into libraries for sure.
Yeah. So many of the seed libraries are attached to a library, as I learned today.
So if anybody wants to guide us on the library system.
Thank you for nudging us, Ken, on that one.
Yeah. Well, I'm out of the loop, like I said. So I think, you know, talking to this community, we have just such an amazing community of seed libraries, many of which are either attached to or in public libraries. And it would be great, you know, for you to get some input from this community about how they feel that it could, you know, create access, like more access to people to be able to view this.
And actually, I know we're running out of time, so I'll be very quick. But I would love, okay, good. Thanks, Pamela. I'm in Australia now. And part of our outreach, you know, with our community screenings, we wanted to sort of create a little bit of a package, right? A little bit about the issues. And one of the things that we always wanted to do, and actually is to have a little bit of a sheet about like how to start a seed library, as you guys have been talking about today, so that it could go with the film. So even here, you know, in Australia, we could somehow start getting a little bit of a ball rolling for seed libraries, which I think has been pioneered mostly your neck of the woods.
Great.
So that people aren't sort of, I don't know what to do and not, you know, I won't do anything. Well, here are some steps you can take. And so we thought that would be a great thing to send out with the film.
Beautiful. So we're going to wrap up. I just want to say thank you so much for choosing our community to share this film with as your soft launch, and just to encourage everyone who got to come to this wonderful Q&A with you, to reach out directly to Camilla and Jim, to go to the website, to think about setting up a viewing at your library or with your community at home. And just Camilla and Jim, I know this was a labor of love over many years and was a lot of work and a lot of investment. So thank you so much for bringing this to life for all of us.
Well, thank you again for being such a great host, and Rebecca and everybody who's been involved in this.
Right. Yeah.
One of my favorite events. Yeah.
Yeah.
So